You're good?
Right. We're
Okay.
on. We're on.
Yep, okay, stand by, everyone.
Hello, hello, hello. It's Mary Parker. I'm back with the Chick in Charge podcast, and I'm never alone. Today we have a wonderful, wonderful guest. We've got Kadakia, and also our co-host, Ms. Sarah Smith with
Hello,
Solution
Mary.
Roads. And we can't do anything without Port. So Port's waving at everyone.
Hey, Port.
We're excited to be here today, and we've got some excellent talent. We're having a ball. We're going to empower you. So get your notepad out.
Right.
Get ready to share the information because we are streaming live from Facebook today. And so I'm going to go ahead and begin asking questions of you, Crystal, if you don't mind.
Yeah, let's roll.
Okay, let's keep this party moving. Today, what I would like to know, you are a millennial. And I'm so interested in the skills and the talent and the change that we are experiencing with millennials because you guys are also smart. And you've taken it a step further. You're teaching and training corporations and other people how to deal with the behaviors of millennials. So now, if you would, please tell me, how did you become or decide to become a consultant?
Yeah, sure. So, my journey's taken me in very diverse directions. So I actually started out in chemical engineering, if you would believe that.
I read that. Interesting.
So I started out in chemical engineering, and I was working for a Fortune 500 company in engineering, and I was that person who just kept on asking all the wrong questions. It wasn't like, oh, how do we fix the pump on the line? Let me go look that up. It was like, how is the team doing? Are we working well together? And so I started having this calling towards training and human capital problems. And so I actually switched to designing training for engineers. And then I ran into this constant issue. About 7 or 8 years ago, we really started seeing the word millennial in the mainstream. It was also Generation Y at that time, which those words are used interchangeably. And I kept seeing the word millennials, and I was designing programs for new hires. I had led the global redesign for the onboarding program at the company. We were doing technical training. I had a boomer as a direct report. And everything we saw about millennials online in white papers and research, it was not vibing with reality. And I started realizing leaders are really struggling. They're really struggling to understand what is meaningful from all of this data they're seeing out there in media. And to be honest, they're still struggling today, because where we're at now is we've had a huge volume of millennial stereotypes marketed, pushed out to us in the space, and it's become the rhetoric. And the rhetoric, the reason why it's there is because we've always complained about the newest generation. I'm going to complain about Generation Z. I think I've already started. And it's just, it's a very natural bias, right? We all have our way of doing things that we grew up with. And then someone new comes along, and of course they've grown up just a bit differently.
Right.
And so I became a consultant in this space because I saw that we had such a virality of those negative stereotypes on media that we've never had before.
Why?
Nobody predicted this.
Why is that?
Because of the invention of social media. So we didn't have the internet and digital technology and so many voices reiterating those complaints over and over again.
Okay.
And so now what we're seeing in this last 2 years, just for the last 2 years, we're starting to see a positive shift.
Yeah.
But normally we would have quit complaining about millennials already. We would have moved on. I mean, the oldest millennial is 37, 38 this year. I mean, unbelievable. We're still talking about them as though they're the new kids on the block. And they're 38. I mean, I'm sorry, if you talk to a teenager, they're like 38 is old.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
old.
Yeah, absolutely.
What do those old people do?
I thought that was old until I was 40.
Well, a lot of research I've done has really helped me in 2 ways. One, in raising my grandchildren. I have from 17 to 25 grandchildren. And the other is I didn't want to bring a lot of boomers into a growing company, because when I'm ready to retire, they are as well. And I know I'll keep coming back and training and giving as much as possible, but I'm watching these companies just fizzling away and downsizing to no end because they don't want to get rid of their current workforce. And with that, what do you believe is one of the biggest surprises we as companies are going to face? But just as importantly, what about the surprises you've encountered?
Mm-hmm. I love to hear how you have seen this challenge that companies are, it's easy for us to want experienced talent. It's like, great, we don't need to train people when they get on the job because they already know the job. Yeah, okay, but anytime someone comes in, they're going to need onboarding.
Absolutely.
And just because you felt like in the past couple of years you've had this huge population of boomers and Gen Xers to work with that are experienced, doesn't mean they're always going to be there, to your point. So I think one of the surprises for me has been how short-sighted companies have been in this space. There are whole industries right now where the majority of the workforce are boomers, and the leadership is still not ready to invest in future talent. They're still thinking, well, I just want to hire experienced talent. I just don't get these millennials. I just think they're lazy and entitled, and that's why we can't retain them. And it's that type of rhetoric that actually continues to create the problem. You get what you see, right? And if what you're seeing through your lens is, oh, these millennials are lazy and entitled, they're asking for all these benefits because they're the trophy generation, and that's not even the reasons why they're asking, folks. And I can't get there until people are willing to let go of this kind of biased lens they've got.
Well, I applaud you for stepping into an arena that's not been treaded. When you're going into the corporations that UPS and FedEx is in talking about retraining them or training them to rethink their processes and the involvement of their workforce, that's huge. Now, what we've had here at All-in-One Security, when I started my company, my primary objective was to raise up other generations of people who look like me. Meaning I wanted to hire African Americans, I wanted to hire women in this non-traditional male-dominated industry. In doing so, I didn't want to bring in all the old habits, and I didn't want to bring in all the huge salaries. Rather, I wanted to bring a group of people to learn and also to train and teach me. Because as I grow, I want to be better as well. And one segment or one demographic will not get that. So thank you for being so courageous. And I know we're going to hear lots about you. As a matter of fact, my granddaughter is out, and I made sure that she got the word that you were here today. So she should probably be online so that we
Hey, how's it going?
That would be Amber.
Hey, Amber.
And I have another question. What was a problem that you were not expecting in both as a chemical engineer first, and then once you decided that you didn't want to do any of that anymore, that you want to be a chick in charge?
Yeah, I think
question.
that's a really good question.
Really good.
I think one of the problems that I ran into, even when you're making a career change as such a young person, right? Today, that's really often labeled as entitled, right? That's the big perception out there. If you're asking for these things, why don't you just put your head down, just focus on your work,
Sit there and shut up.
Yeah.
Yeah, and look how long it took them to get anywhere.
Right.
Or I should say us.
Right. Well, not
Put in your
you were
time.
always doing the thing. You guys are a lot alike, actually.
And that's what I find is that so, I felt very lucky that I had managers who recognize why waste the energy and enthusiasm and potential she's bringing if it's just directed towards a different area, and we can see that she's got that talent in that area. Why not direct her there? Because that's only going to help the company.
Yeah.
But there are people who would look at that same journey and look at it as, oh, wow, what a complainer. She just couldn't put up with her current stuff, and she wasn't loyal, and she was entitled, and she just couldn't, kind of vibe with the traditional mindset. So I felt very lucky that I was in a company culture that actually valued those kinds of transitions. And what I found is when I actually ask older generations, what was your career path? They are just as diverse.
Yeah.
Oftentimes they might be in the same company, so they may not have switched companies as much to do those kinds of changes. But when you're young, nobody really knows what they want to do. Nobody really knows what they want to be when they grow up. It's just back then, I think, I don't know if, and this is something I'm continually learning through my conversations, but sometimes it sounds like the world was almost more forgiving. Like people were willing to mentor younger people, or, you know, the idea of interns not having to solve your company problems.
Right.
Oh, you know, you're the millennial. Why don't you create our whole digital strategy for us? You know, those kinds of job requirements. It didn't seem like that was really the norm. And, you know, I don't want to presume that, you know, but I've heard kind of of course, I've talked to thousands of people about this, but at the same time, I'm still very cautious about making those presumptions. But generally, I would say from what I've heard, the environment was a little bit more forgiving in terms of mentoring, training up, the kinds of responsibilities you had when you started, and those sort of things. So, you know, it's kind of interesting to see. Sometimes I think it's turning the mirror. Sometimes it's turning the mirror into yourself and thinking back, well, what was I like when I was young?
Oh my gosh.
And is it really that different? You know, these folks, the main difference is they've got digital technology to inform their choices. So they've got a lot more information of possibilities versus when, you know, previous generations, you might have had what your neighbors did as a living, what your parents did as a living, what your teachers advised you, but you couldn't see the person in Hawaii who's, you know, able to survive by just traveling the world and creating a blog. Right?
Yeah.
So it's the differences to me between the generations. It's not all these stereotypes and values we talk about, because really those sorts of things are actually fairly similar. They're human needs, and it's, you know, psychological needs that have always been true that we're getting better and better at serving. What's really different is this: we grew up with digital technology, and that's creating a different. Whenever you have more data, it opens up your mind in different ways.
Absolutely.
Right? That's always happened
Absolutely.
again.
So with using this data and all the other things, how are you finding the communication abilities of the younger people?
Great question. I love this question because on one hand, I could tell you my gut instinct is like, we suck. Like, there's definitely things that I get frustrated with personally about the way in which we communicate. So the first thing I'll say is, today we have a lot more options to communicate. And so what happens is our choice around those options is very contextual. What is right for what situation? So we're worried about the right moment to text. What's the right moment to call? What's the right moment to email? And whereas a previous generation might just kind of automatically default to the phone or, you know, the email or whatever the case may be. So the first bit I'll say about communication is contextual. The second thing I'll say is some people are very good at it. They're very good at this context. They know, okay, well, I've got a short thing that I don't need someone to instantly reply to, but it's a quick question. I'll send it over text. It's a one-liner. It doesn't need to end with a period, right? It's that kind of communication. And then there's, you know, the context around, well, let me just leave a voicemail, or let me try calling them because, wow, this text conversation is getting really long. And I think just getting them on the phone is going to help clear up a lot of back and forth. And that's great. So there's people who are using it well. Then you get to the part that frustrates me, which is the fact that you can ghost so easily. Are you all familiar with the term ghosting?
No.
You just text and then say you don't like talking to the person anymore. Yeah. You just stop texting them back. Right? You ghost on them. You're a ghost. You disappear into the virtual thin air that you came from. And where I see this, you know, when it comes to communication, you think about it, when you used to make plans with a friend, you were committed because you could, once you left the house, you had already talked to them on your landline phone. There was nothing to immediately contact someone and be like, I'm not in the mood anymore. Let's, you know, can we rain check? Whereas today, you can just text someone and you know, well, even if they're on their way, I can still reach them. And so a lot of times what I'm seeing from a communication standpoint is there's a commitment issue that's related to communication now because it's easier to get out of things or decide day of or moment of rather than pre-planning. And then the other big issue I see is that ghosting is kind of just thinking that these interactions don't matter as much. So you can just kind of, oh, I got busy and forgot to reply back, and not thinking about the impact.
That is so annoying. It is so annoying.
It's really annoying.
Yeah, but I also, in terms of the communication styles, I look at the employees here. We bring, and I'm intentional about that as well, we bring high school students in for internships during the summer for two reasons. I want to keep the way they communicate, so that's number one for me. But also, it's important for me that we boomers are intentional about transitioning and transferring the talents that we have to the younger generations.
Absolutely.
Because if we don't do it, they won't know.
And if they don't know, I mean, this is the world, right? This is the pivotal time where everyone from this point forward is growing up with digital technology.
Yes.
So whatever you've got, if you don't pass it on and I don't pass it on, as a millennial, I'm that real bridge generation. I had like 10 years of my life where I wasn't immersed in technology. That's that transition point. And then after that, it's been all. So yeah, if we don't teach our kids.
We don't teach them, they're going to be lost. And I mean, we've got to help them or present them with platforms where they can begin learning this stuff really quickly and not be dependent on when they get home, because some communities don't have the resources for them for the young people to emerge, so to speak.
And you hit the nail on the head. It was definitely around intentionality. So whether you're a millennial, whether you're a boomer, being very intentional around your communication method. So even if you're a millennial and you struggle with this because it's not as comfortable talking to people on the phone, just try it, and you'll find that kind of human connection. When you hang up the phone, you feel a lot better when you just talk, and it's going to feel awkward. I've done this. I've called my friends out of the blue who, we maybe years ago we might have talked much more frequently on the phone, but now we just text, right? And every now and then I'll still just call them and try to catch them if they're available. And if we catch and we talk, it's really a great feeling. So it's kind of, we have to kind of relearn, and then for some people learn for the first time what that feeling is like.
Gotcha. I wanted to ask a question.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
If you don't mind.
Sure, please.
The two of you ladies are authors. Both of you are authors. So I want to ask you both. I think it's cool. I seldom sit with two people that have written a book. I can't remember the last time.
How about that? That makes us special.
I was going to say, we're doing
I think that's very
You've got the boomer, and you've got the millennial. And I just think that's so interesting that the two of you have written about, your lives and your opinions, and I don't know if every woman is ready to go jump in and write a book, but I wanted to hear from your perspective and your perspective. What's the thing that makes you sit down to write? What is it?
Yeah, so I was speaking about this. So I've had my business now for 6 years.
Okay.
And I have been doing these talks for about 4 years, trying to change the conversation around millennials. And there was a point where you realize, if I'm going to have reach with this, it's great to talk to audiences, 500, 600 people.
Right.
Okay? That's fantastic.
Right.
And that's scary too, by the way. But, at the end of the day, if you can continue reaching more people, it's just going to help the message. So what helps me sit down and write? There's two things. One is feeling so incredibly compelled to share the message. It's not, it's not about me personally.
Right.
It's about changing this conversation to help everyone.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I want boomers to feel valued, and I want millennials to feel valued.
Right.
And that means the world to me, right? Voices unheard. That's really what I'm about. And right now, for me, it's boomers, millennials. Maybe it's other voices unheard in the future that I want to champion and bring in an inclusive way.
Oh my gosh, love it. You're so young to have such strong and forward-thinking mind.
And there's a lot of personal, reasoning behind that, of growing up, in a very bicultural way. That's a huge influence on me. So when I think about it, there's that personal message aspect. And then the second thing is really setting aside the time to write. So I set aside 2 months because I was traveling almost every week. I was traveling for speaking engagements, and I needed a pause. So I had 2 months of space, and I literally just wrote every day. And I was sick of writing about millennials by the end of it. I was oh my God.
But you did it.
But I did it. But, and it was, I think there's something about, and this is true for all work, at some point you really need to step back and find your way to focus in today's digital world.
Yeah.
And for me, it was, I mean, at some point I wanted to rent a house in Norway to write my next book.
Got it.
Because talk about disconnection. I mean, Norway's gorgeous.
Yeah.
And disconnected.
We'll talk about
Things
that
like
offline.
Yeah. We went there for I had my first international speaking engagement there last year. And
How was it?
it was so awesome. I just fell in love with the country. So,
Cool.
but those would say my two things. And I would never be afraid that you don't have something to say. I think if I had a message for women who are writing, anyone who's writing, don't be afraid that you don't have something to say. When I submitted my proposal to Barry Kohler, I had a female mentor who, we had talked for years, and she just kept saying, you have such a unique perspective. I think you're ready to write a book. And I was like, no way, really? And so I put something together, and she looked at it, and she's like, okay, I'm going to submit this to the publisher on your behalf. And I was like, no kidding. I was going to go through 30 more revisions of this. And I think sometimes it takes someone supporting you to tell you, like, look, this is good enough. Someone once told me, don't let your pursuit for perfection damn the excellent.
Wow.
Don't let your pursuit for
That's
perfection
big.
damn the excellent.
Wow.
It's just, I've kept that. We tend to have I think women especially, we have
Oh
such high
my
standards.
Oh,
And sometimes we're good with what, we don't need to be perfect to be good. And I think it's a really important message for people to know.
yeah, and I had to realize that I'm first cousin to the spirit of perfection. But I wasn't getting much done until I learned to accept an excellence, right? And so for me, I talked about writing this book for about 5 years before I did anything, but I had this woman in my life. And the reason I wrote my book was 2 reasons, really, and so many others spun out of it. But first was to empower women, and the other was to leave an impact for my family and community. And empowering women, I thought, we don't give ourselves enough credit for what we do now. We find reasons to marginalize who we are, and really we are the engine of the world, but we don't give ourselves credit for it. When I moved to Atlanta, I met a lady by the name of Katie Daniels, and my Katie thought I could do anything in the world. She started convincing me that I could. What was happening, she was building my confidence, and she called me her can-do chick. And just as I was writing, I think I was probably in month 3 before I had the title of my book. And the aha moment came up, and I said, the title of my book will be The Chick in Charge, because I could now see my life. And I realized I've been in charge of something all of my life. But being the chick in charge wasn't the personality, it wasn't an attitude, rather it was the position that we took. My mother took a position when she wanted her girls to be educated. My mother took a position when she was a sharecropper, farmer, and didn't want to leave her kids at home all day. So she walked 5 miles in the morning to get to work, another 5 to get back home to check on us, back and forth for 20 miles a day, 6 days a week. And that was a story. That was my mother's story. And as I wrote, I realized that I've got my mom's story, I've got my grandma's story, and my story. So we all have a story to tell. My story just included so many people, but that's my life. And as a result of writing the book, and it took me 6 months, I wrote 1 day per week, but it was from 9 until 1 or 9 till 2 every Monday. And of the 6 months, I missed two Mondays. And I was so happy. And I thought, well, if you really put this in a time frame, it really wasn't 6 months. It was over a span of 6 months. And so the other, from an empowering perspective, I would also say that, with your story, don't worry about how it sounds to you. But the information and your experience is what you're sharing with your readers. And that, to me, is very, very important. You're giving them shortcuts. You're helping them to avoid some of the pitfalls. You're giving them a sense of directions that they would have otherwise not had. And most importantly, you're sharing your spirit. You're sharing yourself with others. And I always say, I can do it, you can too. You just gotta be determined that that's what you want to do.
That was such a touching That is such a touching story. You know, just the generations and what brought you here, what made you who you are. That's such a touching story. And again, it's unique. It's really unique to you and what you've been through, and people can relate to it.
Absolutely.
So it's a both and, which I think is so interesting.
Yeah, and same with your story as well. And I have to get to know you. You said it, but I'm really hearing mini me in you. I'm industrial as well. I was manufacturing in the automobile industry.
Yeah, what I'm
So,
talking about.
I know exactly what you're
Let's go
talking
fix,
about.
Let's go fix that.
Yes.
Right there. Yeah, let's go do that.
She drove the fixed cars, and then she worked at Gmail. Amazing,
Awesome.
amazing.
Yeah. So it's been a great life.
And it's not about how fast you write the book, by the way.
No.
For anyone, anybody who's listening to this who's going to write a book, my fiance will tell you I'm kind of crazy when it comes to you got to cram it in, and just so you know, that can come with costs. So it's not at all about rushing it. If it takes you 2 years to write your book,
or
write it.
10. Just
Who
do
cares?
it if that's what you want to do.
Yeah.
And the other tidbit of information I'd like to say as it relates to writing the book, it's a story. Just tell the story. Figure out the order later, but get it out. You can go back, because if you start thinking about chapter 1, you're going to say something in chapter 10 that should go in chapter 1. So just tell the story, go back, organize it, and then build the content from there.
Ditto.
I think that's another maybe series of 4 or 5 podcasts about how to write a book with Crystal and Mary. I'm trying.
Oh, that would be fun.
I would love to do that.
Well,
Very
Sarah,
cool.
that's important, because I'm talking with more and more people today that if I had someone to encourage me a little bit more back then, I probably would have authored about 5 books by now.
Mary, they're still,
I'm on my
you're
second
still
one.
a young chick, so keep going. Keep going.
We'll tell the senior citizens, we'll talk about the senior citizens and our positions on one of the podcasts as
I
well.
want to give a shout out to a friend of Crystal and of mine, and who needs to meet Ms. Mary Parker, which is Dr. Ben Kinzinski at Emory University at the Goodwood Business School, who introduced me to Crystal in December.
Wow.
Yep. He invited me over to see Juan Perez, who's the Chief Information Officer at UPS, speak. And I got there early, and I got to see Crystal address the executive ed program, which is one of in the top 10 in the world. So there was Crystal addressing this group.
Love it.
And she killed it. And it was, I remember it. It was fantastic. And she's an excellent public speaker. How can people get in touch with you, Crystal, if they want to reach you?
So first, I would always recommend folks connect with me on LinkedIn.
Gotcha.
It's just the best way to
That's what
see me.
I did.
Always drop a note of like how you come to find me. So if it's through this podcast, just let me know, because it just creates that richness of connection.
Very
You
smart.
can always email me as well, and I'm sure you can provide that information.
Yep.
But it's ckadakia@embodyconsulting.com. It's very easy, very open, very easy to reach. Dr. Ben Kinzinski, really great guy, really great professor at Emory. And what's cool is he actually included my book in the curricula for the executive MBA
What
program.
a compliment.
Wow.
What a compliment.
It's so cool. So every semester now, I've been going in and just giving the class kind of the fresh insights that I've had over that quarter or that semester. And so that's what you heard, which it's always my top of mind. I really challenge myself to do the least preparation for his class, because what it gives people is the essence of what's really going on now and how my work has advanced since the book came out.
Smart.
So it's really cool to see someone who is teaching an MBA program and at Emory, one of the top business schools in the country, thinking about, hey, how do we prepare leaders to have these conversations and to go in with a different mindset towards millennials?
Yeah.
So that's another thing. I would consider, if there's any listeners out there who are in the education space, so think, I'm always open to people connecting and requesting a copy of the book to review it and that sort of thing, because it could be that thing that helps change mindsets, either at your workplace or if you're training people.
Excellent point. Very smart. Very smart.
Wonderful. We're so proud of you.
Thanks.
So proud of you.
Thanks.
Whew.
I'm so full.
I know. You had quite
I was going to take the afternoon off, but
You might,
you've given me energy. I've got some things to do. Holiday, I'm going to take the actual holiday off, but not the week.
Yeah, I was going to say you could start July 4th early.
Yeah.
That's good.
No, we've got work to do. This has been a really, really fun day. Sarah, would you say that we've accomplished our mission?
I think that we have created many, many new topics to discuss, and I know that I would love to have Crystal come back.
I want to have Crystal come back, but Crystal,
Sure.
we have to also talk about you being a presenter. We have an online university. Fax University is launching in September. And of all the pieces I covered, one of the most critical pieces I didn't, and that is your topic. So we're going to discuss that offline and see, oh my gosh. So thank you for opening that up for me. We will definitely have you back, and we're going to dedicate a time where people can call in and we can, really engage you with the community.
Yeah.
We'd love to answer people's questions.
Yeah,
fantastic.
And just thoughts as you're listening to this sort of material come across. Again, it's a change in conversation.
Yeah.
Right? So it might not be how you normally think about these topics, but I think that's why it's fun. Because it's not, it's not the same old.
It's not
millennial
traditional
rhetoric
conversation.
words.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
where do we go
Thought-provoking
from here
stuff.
together? So
Yeah, I am excited. I want to bring you in, and
thanks so much for having me.
well, I just thought of something. When we have our annual retreat, we're going to bring you
Oh
in.
my God.
Make a note of that.
Got
for
it.
me, but we're
Got
going to
it,
bring
got
it.
it,
That'll
got
be
it.
in December.
Got
We'll
it.
get you booked for that. What can I say? It keeps getting better, doesn't it?
Hell yes.
Yeah. So we're gonna, we're starting out the podcast to do once per week.
Yeah.
But with talent like this
We're
and
kicking-
these
we're kicking that
conversations,
number out the door.
yeah, we're really trending here, and I'm excited.
Well,
I hate to go, but we have to. It has been the most informative day. I want to wish all of you a happy, and safe 4th of July weekend. We're done for today, but stay tuned. There's more to come of the Chick in Charge podcast with Mary Parker, co-hosting Sarah Smith.
And we're out. Awesome.
Wow.
Wow, that's such great information.
Oh my God!
Really good.
Great
This was
question.
great.
Great.
Love,
questions. You guys
love
make
it.
it easy.
You guys have cool chemistry.
Yeah, we
I was
did.
writing that down. It was
Good.
excellent. Great chemistry with Crystal. No, because you're both.
Well, it's easy to do yourself.
We're gonna do something.
You know,
She's a really good. Like she doesn't even know how good she is. So.
Best people don't.
I just want to work and get it done. Yeah.
There we go.
So
There
you
we
might have
go.
someone else that you guys should talk to as
Love.
well.
We
just
love
knowing a little bit more
referrals.
about your focus. But Cassandra Worthy, remind me or I'll send you hers. I'll put a note in my phone.
Okay.
But she has a really interesting diversity and inclusion bent and like a change management bent. She's an African American female, really strong, good personality, great humor. She's very dynamic.
Love
person.
that.
I think
Cool.
she'd be a great
We'll
fit
reach
for
out
this.
to her.
You know, Q that was here
Yeah.
and Crystal would be interesting together too.
Absolutely.
Even if you wanted to have them on together
We can do
sometime,
that.
I think that
We
would
can
be
do that.
very fun.
Because this is just opening up my,
Yeah.
I'm going somewhere with this.
Exactly.
We've got our speakers for the conference.
It's
Ah,
kicking. Yep, that's good. It's good.
And you already have a copy of my book, right?
I do.
Because okay,
I bought it.
I was
I
gonna
bought
read
it.
it, and then I
And you
didn't,
know what?
So.
I had it at home ready to go, and then I was running, and I left it there. So
I'm sure we'll see.
yes, absolutely.
I should have
Just
brought
the
another.
overview.
I just for some reason in my head I had the
And
thought that you guys
Crystal,
already
if
got
you
it. So.
are going to speak somewhere and you want me to post it on social media because you're a friend of Mary's and
Yeah,
a friend of
sure,
the Chick in Charge, just let me know and you got it.
That would be great.
Sarah, let's schedule some fireside chats.
Love.
Yeah, it would be great. To
And
do
we'll have an
Q&As.
open conversation.
That's great. That's great.
Well, yeah, no, I'm so excited, and that's as well. That's such a. I think I'm so glad that you've written a book and you're telling your story. And I think it's just much needed. Much needed.
Yeah.
Because I've been so glad lately to see where the film industry is going with diversity and really trying to write things from diverse perspectives. Like I've seen Asians, actually writing things from an Asian perspective, seeing Black people write things from a Black perspective, and it's just so, it's like a breath of fresh air. Like, yeah, no offense.
And this
no offense, you guys. I got kind
what?
of sick of white people writing about us.
Yeah.
I just like, do you really want
I never
it got
wrote
really-
anything about you guys.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's not.
Well, she's writing
not
about
really-
us now. You're telling me you're the real deal.
You know
star.
what? And I took a bunch of pictures and
And
sent
we
them
all have
out
our
on
own stories.
Instagram.
You know,
and-
not.
No,
it's just so it's just so refreshing. Like without, I can't say that
That's cool.
exactly live stream, but it's just so refreshing to have
Yeah.
someone just tell the story from their cultural point of view,
That's
correct.
and their life point of view. Like I experienced this. I'm not retelling and reinterpreting.
This is my life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's so.
And we've sent out.
It's cool. No, it's very. I agree with you.
We're on this side of our lives, so to speak. You know, the one thing that I want to see is that we, African American people, clean up their acts. The talent, the resources is there.